I'm getting paid to do this piece. It's gonna go in a long hallway. And it's gonna go into the federal building. I'm not gonna tell you what I'm getting paid, but it's a year's salary, okay? So it's worth doing. And so I was asked to do a mural or a painting, a large painting about Chattanooga from the African American perspective. Because there is a mural already in the federal building that's been there since the 1950s that's very disrespectful to Native Americans and African Americans. So they want an answer to that mural that's up now. And so during COVID, you know, social justice came to the forefront. And there was a lot of demonstrations and protests about art in public places. Were any of you aware of those? They were pulling down statues of Confederate generals and things like that, right? So when asked to do this, you know, I've been thinking for months about it. And when I think back, there's not a lot about Chattanooga. I was born here. That in the past that I want to paint about, because most of it is negative. For instance, in Chattanooga, everybody heard of the Bessie Smith Hall. I'm giving you the context of this art. Now, I had to think about all this stuff, right? Our history in Chattanooga. The Bessie Smith Hall, everybody know who Bessie Smith was? Who was Bessie Smith?
She was, wasn't she a famous, I want to say jazz singer or something?
Yeah, blues. Basically.
Blues, yeah.
And you knew that? Right. So let me tell you how things are placed into context, because I live here. When I first married my wife, she was born in London. Her history is from the Caribbean, Jamaica. Her father's from Jamaica, and her mother's from St. Kitts. And so in the 1950s, they came over on a ship called the Windrush to England after the Second World War to rebuild England. And that's where her mother and father met and got married and everything, okay? So she has a whole different way. Once you leave America and go to Europe, when you start thinking about race and stuff like that, it's totally different. Would you agree? Anyway, it's different. So when she came here, and I took her to the Bessie Smith Hall, and she's a jazz enthusiast, she asked me, why would they name an institution after Bessie Smith? Why would they promote that? Bessie Smith was like a honky-tonk singer who sang negative, X-rated stuff. How will that make me feel good about my history? The Bessie Smith Hall did not start off as the Bessie Smith Hall. My mentors, Roy Knowles and Miss Jacola Goodman, was a people just like me who decided they wanted to get together and build something in Chattanooga that would help black people and everybody else educate us about our history. It started off as the African American Museum. And they were all about our history. Jacola Goodwin, she was a tough teacher, very eccentric, but she was tough on teenagers. As teenagers, she got us in line and kept us in line, and you know, We hated her then, but love her when you grow up, right? She wanted us to be somebody when we grew up. She knew the challenges that we would have. Roy Knowles was his office was on, it was called 9th Street on MLK, and he's the first person to introduce me to black art. And I was in the 12th grade. I had never seen or been taught about black art before. They were about our history and our culture, and that's what that was supposed to have been about. And I didn't notice it until my wife got here, and she says, see, I didn't know what she sang, Bessie Smith. And she let me listen to one of her songs. It's totally degrading. See, when other people tell your story, they're gonna always make you less. But it's up to artists to preserve our own history and culture and celebrate us. And as you're becoming teenagers, that's your job. Anybody hear of Nelson Mandela? Everybody know who Nelson Mandela was? Raise your hands. He liberated South Africa from apartheid, which is slavery. He started as a teenager. Teenagers rule the world. Teenagers fight the wars. Teenagers change history. It's the teenagers who changes things. You can't be a baby your entire life. You got to grow up at some point. And when you become a teenager, usually you are seeking who am I? Those are the questions you're asking yourself. What am I about? You start dressing differently. You gravitate around people who dress differently with you, who believe what you believe. Is that right? You know, if you're going to be golf, you're going to be around the golf. Whatever you believe in. So, that's up to you to grow up now. It's time to grow up. And it's your world now. You can become an expert at this right now. This is the time for you to become great. All your music stars become great when they're teenagers. What's that lady name who's the biggest female pop star now? What's her name?
Taylor Swift.
Taylor Swift. Y'all heard of her, right? How many like her? Don't be ashamed. Raise that hand up high. But I saw one of her concerts. I never seen so many people in one place. She's huge. Do you know she started when she was a teenager? Writing songs in Nashville for people.
13. Started.
It's your time now. It's your time. But you're going to have to believe in yourself and your abilities and your talents. Say you do art and music, right? You do all this stuff. Put all that stuff together. I've done it. I had things where I was dancing, drawing, live, showing videos, making music, doing all that at the same time. It's called performance arts. Okay? I'm trying to light something under your behind right now. Anybody getting some feeling like... Now, if I had sold paintings like y'all did at your age, you wouldn't be able to tell me nothing. I'll tell you, for real. When I was in 12th grade, I was selling paintings for $25. And I was happy about that, too. Okay. And so, my task was to do something about Chattanooga. I figured it out now. I couldn't figure out, what can I do about Chattanooga? Because when I remember the past, I'm thinking about the Civil War was fought here. Did you all know that? Very important Civil War battle was fought right here in Chattanooga. The battle is called the Battle of what beyond the clouds. I didn't want to do no painting with Civil War people on it. I didn't want to put no cannons on it, because usually in Chattanooga pictures, you see cannons and all that kind of stuff, Confederate soldiers and Unions. I didn't want to do nothing like that. I wanted to do something that's uplifting. So I decided I'm going to do a painting about the future, my vision for the future, and I'm going to reflect on the past. That's the context. So the first thing I did, I'm just going to show you my thinking so that you know that when you go to your piece of paper, I want you to think, because the art is up here. So that figure there, that's a design for a sculpture. I haven't made that sculpture yet, but I did a group of sculptures called Sister. And this is the first sculpture, and I did one about Gullah. I call one Gullah Sister. And my sculptures have been shown and displayed in different places. But that's going to be a sculpture one day. But usually I do the sculpture first, and then I might put the sculpture in a painting after I do it. But I needed this image. And the sculpture is going to look exactly like that. I call that Big Mama. Because in my cultures, Big Mama is your grandmother. And most of our, in my culture, the majority of our families are broken. And a lot of our kids live with their grandparents. Your grandparents is where you learn about your history and everything. And so that's why her dress is like that. But in her dress is the history of Chattanooga. So I have the Native American there. I have the black slave there. That's the guy with the tear in his eye. But also I just like birds, so I put the bird on there. But I have Africa. We're from Africa. So in Chattanooga, slaves came here to find freedom, and they lived in North Chattanooga. All of North Chattanooga was called, what was it called? Liberty City or something like that. So slaves came to, and they lived in North Chattanooga. No, it was called Camp City or something like that. And they camped in North Chattanooga. And across the river, where we are now, that was considered freedom for them. If they could just get across the river. They didn't want slaves across the river though. But if we could get over here, we could get a job, become successful, start a business. That's what embodies that figure right there. That figure looks back to Africa and forward to America. That's why you see the red, white, and blue down there in the corner. So and behind her is the federal building, which I haven't painted in yet, and you see an American flag. Behind the American flag, I'm thinking about Africa, and I'm going to put the continent of Africa. When you sail to Africa, the first part of land that you see, I'm going to put that back here somewhere. It's either going to be here or over here. What will determine where I put that continent is, now nobody's gonna know it's Africa but me. But somebody who's a historian who know what Africa looks like when you first see it on a boat, they'll know it's Africa. It's all about balance to me. I sort of have enough over there right now. So it's all about this. I decided yesterday to let this ocean be a thread through the painting, to let water be a thread through the painting. Water is a symbol for spiritualism. In the Bible, water, Jesus said, I am the living water. But in all religions, water means spirit. Okay? It's called, what is it called in the I forgot. So I'm gonna connect all these panels with that line. And that's the hardest thing to do, is to connect a long line of panels. Over here, I've made a decision, because there's 100 ways to do this. I think I'm gonna put some trees, and I like going to the lake and stuff like that, so I'm gonna put the lake probably in that panel somewhere. This area here, when blacks came over here, there was a time when we had to live in South Chattanooga because of segregation, and we had to live downtown here due to segregation. Everybody know what segregation was, right? So this area is called, where you guys first started taking art class over there on the west side. That's the seat of black history here in Chattanooga. The ridge up there, all of the most wealthiest, including Bessie Smith, lived up there on that ridge, right above where the school was. And I found out that area, when the Cherokee was there, was called Blue Goose. So I'm going to put some geese in the picture, and they're going to be painted blue. Now, of course, if I do all this and don't look right, I'll change it. I can always change it, right? But this is what I figured out. Then I'm going to put some young people on here, because I believe that young people are the future. And my challenge is to use my style, my art style, so that, if this is ever removed from the federal building, I can also exhibit it in a museum. It'll have my style. I have things that I call African chips. You guys, did you see these patterns that was on here beneath these things before? These are called African chips. I developed that in the 80s because some of my mentors was called Afro-Cobra. Afro-Cobra was the only black art movement in America. And a couple of the founders of Afro-Cobra was my mentors. And so Frank Smith created these patterns and designs. He's one of the founders of Afro-Cobra. Afro-Cobra was founded in Chicago. And I met Frank Smith when he was teaching in DC at, what's the school in DC, the black school in DC? Howard University. He was a teacher there. And I interviewed him. I went to DC to interview him when I was working on my master's. So I'm learning from artists, right? And of course, Frank Smith has exhibited all over the Netherlands, really, Afro-Cobra. Europe, they would exhibit in Europe and stuff like that, but in Africa. So that's the context of everything. So all of this has to do with my experiences. The judge who's over all of this wanted the courthouse to be in the picture, and he wanted something about Volkswagen to be in the picture. So I put that car, a moving Volkswagen, to satisfy what he needed, and the courthouse is behind her, and the flag to satisfy what he needed in the picture. But some kids that I was their pastor was in a parade years ago, but I still have the photographs. And I created this parade. It's called the Festival of Praise. Thousands of people went to it. And I have them marching across the bridge with flags. I'm gonna put those kids in this painting. And it's gonna be very I wanna go very abstract, and it's gonna be abstract, but I have to have enough realism in the picture to satisfy the judge. So he's a federal judge here, and I think he came up here one day when I wasn't here. He's so important that he can't go anywhere without security, and he can't like say he's going to be at a place, but he can show up. You know, he could show up today, and I don't know he's coming, and he'll always have his security with him. But so can you see how I planned everything out? That's what I want you to do. I want you to plan everything and make decisions. So today, and you probably have an hour. Yep. Today, what I want you to do is I want you to use your brushes, but I don't want you to use, I want it to just to be gray. I don't want a lot of grays in your painting today. You just want black ink drawing. I want the graphics in there with just the drawing. Okay, so of course you clean your brush with the water, but I don't want a whole lot of grays. I want your paper to be pretty dry instead of wet. Do you understand what I mean? And I want you to think about your culture, who you are, what you know. If you don't know much about your own culture, just think about at home. You know, what I like to do. Something about you, make it very personal. I suggest you start with a very small brush and start drawing. And just get into and share that with us, okay? All right, you can start.